Good morning. I'm all filled up with religion this morning. At 8 o'clock, I was downstairs at the Protestant service that Reverend Poling conducted, and then I went up from there to the Catholic service, which Father Fenton conducted, so I'm full of religion. We're starting a little late, and after the program is over, I'll make a few announcements, but I want to introduce Ray Wilson, and who's from California, and who's on the staff of Dr. McBurney out there. And I think it'd be nice if Ray would tell you something about himself and a little about Dr. McBurney and what he's doing, and then he will introduce our guest speaker.
Thank you, Ms. McKinney. It's a delight to be here this morning. I'm happy to have this honor to present Dr. Poling to you, and he'll be coming in just a moment to speak to you and those who are coming in. I hope that you will give him your undivided attention, because what he has to say today to you is very important. He delivers this address from many long years of experience and from deep convictions, and therefore I'm deeply honored to be on the platform with him today. I am honored to be a part of the program of this entire rally. Dr. McBurney, whom many of you heard speak here on Friday night, is the news analyst on the Voice of Americanism radio program, which is produced in Glendale, California at the Center for American Research and Education. It is heard on approximately 65 radio stations all over the United States and now in Canada, in most of the major population areas of the country. The Voice of Americanism is a news commentary, news analysis program from conservative, anti-communist viewpoint. It is not a religious program, it is a news commentary program, but of course with fundamental religious convictions as its background. It is 7 years old, the program, and is reaching more than 1 million people a day, and is now carrying a great strong voice for freedom and conservative thought throughout America. I'm delighted to be associated with him, and I believe that he made a great many friends here on Friday night. It was his first opportunity to be a part of this great annual program in Boston. I talked with him last night. In fact, he called me at 2 o'clock this morning. I don't know why he did that, but it was 11 o'clock there, and of course he's just going good at 11 o'clock at night. And so he thought nothing of calling me. You know, when the urge struck him to call Ray, he decided to do it regardless of what time it was, and it was 2 o'clock this morning here. And I almost fell out of bed when the phone rang, but he told me that he was just thinking again about what a great privilege it had been to be here and how thrilled he was to be a part of this great program, and he was looking forward to coming back again next year and years to come. It's my pleasure to serve with him as the executive director of the Voice of Americanism and the Center for American Research and Education. I'm, of course, in that capacity responsible for all the office operations and the administrations of the whole organization. Mr. Art Smith, whom many of you know, is here with us. He is on our staff as executive director of our radio department offices, and we have put together a great team, and we're looking forward to great things in the years ahead, and we're hoping that the program will become more and more effective. I've had the opportunity of traveling a great deal with Dr. McBurney throughout the world and America, conducting seminars and lectures, and as I said previously, this is my first opportunity to come to Boston, and I'm just delighted. That's enough about me. I want to talk to you right now for a moment about our guest speaker this morning, because he's the important one, and he's the one you came to hear. And I want to tell you a little bit about my good friend, Dr. Charles Poling. And to begin with, I'll tell you that he's from Phoenix, Arizona. He's the senior minister of the Church of All Christian Faiths in Phoenix, and it's a rapidly growing church. Just, I think, a couple of years old, isn't it, Dr. Poling? 5 years old, all right, I made a mistake. 5 years old, but the last time I talked with him about his church program, he said that the facilities they were using were not able to hold the crowds that were coming. They were building a new church program and facilities there, and the whole program is growing rapidly. Dr. Poling has become recognized as one of the leaders of the valiant company of Christian patriots who are carrying on an unremitting crusade against socialistic and liberal invasion of the Christian church and our national government. His prepared statement blasting the National Council of Churches, which he delivered from the pulpit of the First Presbyterian Church of Phoenix, Arizona on February 12th, 1961, attracted worldwide attention and inspired the organization of the National Committee of Christian Laymen. Dr. Poling was given Christian Crusades Award as Outstanding Minister of the Year in 1963 and the CIC Freedom Award for outstanding service in the field of religion. In 1967, he was given the Congress of Freedom Award for outstanding service in a meritorious effort to restore individual freedom and states' rights as originally guaranteed by the Constitution of our United States. He's preached in pulpits all over America, as well as Canada, Oxford, and London, recognized as a great Christian patriot, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to present to you at this great rally on this Sunday morning here in Boston, Massachusetts, my good friend, a great patriot, Dr. Charles Poling.
I'm reminded, after listening to that introduction, of a thing that happened a few months ago. My brother, who was 8 years older than I am, and it is possible for people to be older than Charlie Poling, he changed his address from New York to heaven. And the word went out over the land that Dan Poling had died. But some of the papers got a little bit mixed up, and they reported that I had taken my journey to that better country. And Mrs. Poling received letters of condolence, and they were beautiful. One especially I wanted kept, but somehow it got away. Someone stole it. I didn't realize that I had friends like that until I read it. Then I knew the sweet lady would be terribly embarrassed when she found out I was still in the land of the living, so I thought I owed her a letter. And I borrowed from Mark Twain. The report had gone out years ago that he had died. And he wrote the editor of one of the papers, and he said, "Sir, I would like to inform you that the report of my death has been greatly exaggerated." I have borrowed my subject from Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, a great masterpiece, delivered November the 19th, 1863. And I want to read a portion of it as a setting for the message of this morning. And I quote, "That this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth." Now, I'm sure we'll all agree that we judge an industry, manufacturer, a building, an institution, by the excellence of the finished product. And we can apply this philosophy, this rule, to any area or activity of life, even to the institutions of education, religion, and government. And if you add to that the institution of the home, you have the four basic institutions of civilization. Now let me illustrate. We have in our home a mantel clock. It belonged to Mrs. Poling's grandparents. We know its age to be many years, over 100. The clock was left to Mrs. Poling, our family, when grandfather and grandmother Grant died. Now this clock has been ticking off the minutes and hours since long before Mrs. Poling was born. It has heard the birth cry of a child, Mabel Grant, my Mabel. I think it wept when those it loved and guided through the days of their years left this earth, took their journey to that better country. Today all clocks in the Poling home are set by this ancient timepiece. Now you'll smile at this, and you're entitled to smile once in a while. But at times I have addressed this ancient member of our family thus: "Sir, after all these years, you can't be correct. Of course, you have a perfect right to slow down. You just have to be tired. I'll check with the telephone. I check and return to apologize, for the old clock is, as always, ticking off the truth. The old clock tells me that the artisans of long ago were master craftsmen. They wrought with skill and pride to produce a delicate timepiece to serve many generations. The workmen of that long ago invested their honest best to produce a finished product worthy to bear the name Seth Thomas. Often when I need encouragement, and that happens quite often, and a challenge, I open the door of that clock and read the inscription the manufacturer placed there so long ago. There is the instruction for setting, but I'm not interested in that. That setting business is Mrs. Polling's department. It's a warranty I read and reread. You know what that says? Just 5 words. Seth Thomas clock. Warranted good. Slightly less than 200 years of honest service entitles our clock to that proud guarantee. Reminds me of the loud, extravagant claims of our modern advertisers and pitchmen. It's so different. I have a strong conviction that too much of our modern advertising is designed and pointed for morons. During World War II and before we crossed the Channel, I had an opportunity to visit a shop in Oxford, England. I bought several pairs of shears and sent them home to Mabel. I knew the shears were the best produced, for I purchased them from a Sheffield outlet. Now, a college, a university, gains standing and wins respect, not because of its size or endowment, but because of its finished product, its alumni. My first college was a small denominational school that no longer exists. Church unions and financial troubles finally proved too much. And on a sad day, my first alumni, or first alma mater, closed her doors and today remains but a cherished memory. Some years ago, a group of alumni held an informal reunion. We called the roll from the Book of Memory, not only of students but of the faculty, as we named one after another our classmates and students who had gone before and several who had come after. We had taken our departure. We proudly discovered that many of the finished products of that small school had achieved national, a few international recognition. Many walked with the famous and great. I confess to you, we must really have been squares. For you know, it never occurred to us that we had come to that campus to govern, to instruct, and to give direction to the faculty and governing body. In our backward state, we assumed that each member of that faculty knew his course, the course he taught. We had come there to be taught, to learn, to get an education. Our home training had been such that the idea of starting a riot, kidnapping the dean, setting fire to a building never entered our mind. Such acts were for the mad, the lawless, and savage. Among other things, we had come there to learn good manners, respect for constituted authority, to love our country and the land we were on, and to fear God. We also learned that America was worth living for and fighting for, and if necessary, worth dying for. The flag was the everlasting symbol of our lofty dreams, the lofty dreams of those gallant patriots who through brave sacrifice, tears and blood, vouchsafed to us freedom and a goodly heritage. It was unthinkable that any normal person would become insane enough to desecrate and defile this banner of our liberty. Yes, sir. I think it fair and proper to judge an institution by its finished product. Through the ages, a religion is judged by what it does for its disciples and the land or lands it occupies and to which it ministers. Take a long look at the backward and benighted, and if you would know why they are in their sorry and shameful state, study carefully and investigate their religion. Now, obviously, we can't conduct a study in comparative religions. However, we must take a hasty look at the baby religion of the great living religions, the religion of our America. I suppose to be accurate, we must speak of this as our Judeo-Christian religion. However, to me and all Christians, a religion that has made us great and free is a religion that honors and worships the true and living God and His Son, Jesus the Christ. If any nation can rightly lay claim to the title Christian, I think that nation is our America. We have marched to our place in the sun as the greatest and mightiest nation this world has ever known, because as no other people we have sought to follow and obey God. Through the years, the churches of America have served as the servants and voice of God. I'm persuaded that America's present shame and woe is largely due to the fact that the church, in too many instances, has gotten herself lost and has gone after strange gods. Christianity has never failed. God has never failed. Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever, the Alpha and the Omega. He has never failed when we have given Him a chance to move and work in and through us. Again, I say we judge a religion by its finished product, by what it does for its people and the land it ministers to. And this same rule applies to government. We can judge a system of government, we can appraise its worth and excellence by the kind of people it produces and conditions that government produces under which the people are required to live and work. The worth of a governmental system is revealed in the respect a nation commands as she stands among other nations of the world. Not a question of what we think of ourselves, but the vital and burning question as far as our national survival is concerned is what we stand, how we stand in the estimation of other nations. What do you think? Today, do we have their respect or their contempt? Do they respect our honor and integrity, our courage? Do other nations know us as a people of courage and patriotic fervor? Does the world know us as a law-abiding, decent, and God-fearing people? We'll take a second look at that in 2 or 3 hours when I'm half through. I do know that there was a day when we were respected and the envy of the whole civilized world. You know how I know? I lived in that day. But we oldsters, we squares, are not with it. We do not realize that this is a new day, a new age. The things that were sufficient for yesterday will just not meet the need and requirements of today. We must relate our religion to the children of this generation, and it, of course, never occurs to the church to relate the people of this generation to the religion of Jesus Christ. We are told that even our national constitution is outmoded and must be worked over, and our rules of morality are a hangover from the Dark Ages. The cry today is for more freedom, academic, moral, and religious freedom. It develops that what the protesters really have in mind is not freedom at all, but license. Now let's be fair and honest. Strip off the wraps and take a close look. Scrutinize those good old days that gained the admiration and respect, yes, at times the envy of the world. Really now, just how good were they? Lest we become too proud, with a pride that may border on arrogance, let's go back that we may retrieve the things of value, if indeed there is found to be such. Then, too, standing back there and viewing the now and present, gain a greater degree of appreciation for the rewards and blessings that are ours today. As I have indicated, I can speak with knowledge and authority, for I was born and lived the early years of my life in those times. I think I'm qualified and can give admissible testimony. I was around before the transition from the horse and buggy to the automobile. I'm not ashamed of this. I was here before the gasoline age, before air travel, before the atomic age of fright. I was here in that faraway time when in our wars we killed on a more modest scale and left something to bury. I get a small idea of how backward we are. or we were, rather. How comforting it is living in this enlightened age, realizing that now we have a potential that enables us to wipe out whole continents, all vegetation, all life. Yes, sir, I was around before the space age, before computers, before our modern labor-saving devices, before a myriad of gadgets, appliances, TVs, radios, and such, I quote, that can be financed so we can enjoy while paying, and enjoy that paying business from matrimony to the grave. But I might as well admit that we didn't have bathrooms. We had our baths in a wash tub. We got our water from an open well or a pump that froze up in winter and had to be primed in all seasons. On a historic day when I was a small boy, Father brought home a zinc. You spell that with a Z. Mother insisted, CC, it isn't a zinc, that's a sink. Well, Father, bless his gentle soul, could be stubborn too. Always that dingus to Father was a zinc. And I'll have you know my father was a college president. Is it any wonder students of those days were never adequately educated? There was another thing that we didn't have in those days of darkness and superstition. We didn't have the income tax. Let me announce that, in my estimation, this tax has proved to be an instrument of mischief and has produced more liars and crooks than any other agency ever dreamed up in the confused thinking of a thoroughly confused legislative bodies. This tax has served to circumvent and dishearten the children of free enterprise. It has been a filibuster and hostile front to personal ambition and creative genius. Godfrey O'Hara, who composed so many of our great anthems and songs that have lifted our music from the common to the sublime, told me that one song written before the income tax netted him over $1 million. Later and after the income tax, O'Hara produced There Is No Death, I Walk Today Where Jesus Walked, Soft Were Thy Hands, Dear Jesus, and many other of his songs paid Uncle Sam large dividends, and this dreamer of great and good dreams, this master craftsman and creator, received a shamefully small dividend. I ask you, what kind of a system have we created, and what kind of a system do we tolerate that discourages and penalizes genius? Of course, today we look back upon the stupidity of the unenlightened good old days and thank whatever gods we worship today. And we no longer operate over those outmoded rules and systems. But for the record, I must recount some of the benefits and blessings simple folk they just imagined they enjoyed. We enjoyed domestic peace and tranquility. I think this was largely due to the fact that home was more than a house where father and mother stopped off for a short time to grab a snack, change clothes for a night on the town and a few snorts at the oldie tavern, back to the house to relieve the babysitter and catch a few winks before the return to the mine. In those good old days, Junior did not boast, I am my own man, for he knew this was not true. Junior was subject to parental law and authority. He did not have to go to college or university to find the answer to the question, who am I? He knew who he was, unless he was an idiot. He also knew that civil laws and school rules were to be obeyed, for he had learned obedience and respect for law at home. You see, he was a product of a home and not a house where he was the despotic ruler. Juvenile delinquent, dropout, were terms unknown in those good old days. Children and youth were not prowling the streets all hours of the night to idle away the time, mugging and raping, vandalizing, and when they're childish pranks, they refer to them as such. were interfered with, screaming at the top of their lungs, police brutality. College students were not conducting love-ins, sit-ins, and protest marches that ended in violence and the destruction of school property. Kooky as the political, social, and religious customs and mores of those days appear today, they created for us a land of peace and security, a land of law and a citizenry that respected that law. Those were times when moral decency and godliness were respected and held inviolate. Oh yes, those were times when simple folks sang, and with enthusiasm and understanding, America the Beautiful. Remember it? We sing it in my church every once in a while. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. Confirm thy soul in self-control. Remember this? Thy liberty in law. The backward, happy people of those unenlightened days brought forth a government that was the envy of the nations of the civilized world, a nation that commanded the respect of all people. That America sired a peace-loving people, but a people who could not be bluffed nor bullied. Her leadership was above dealing with or negotiating with international punks, tyrants, and outlaws. Her people were fearless and loyal. They loved the land they were on and reverenced the flag as a proud symbol not only of liberty, but of all the proud and lofty dreams of men who had struggled, fought, and died to vouchsafe to them and their children the blessings and security of freedom. In those days, people were known as patriots and were proud to be designated as flag wavers. When danger threatened, they were proud to fight, and if required, they were willing to die for their America. Life was exacting and hard, but life was rewarding and good. America recognized God as sovereign and ruler, worthy of obedience and reverence. The faith of our fathers proved a divine chemistry that made America the greatest and most powerful nation this world has ever known. I said we judge an institution, an industry, by the excellence of its finished product. We judge a religion by what it does for its disciples and the land or lands it ministers to. We judge a system of government by the kind of people it produces and what it does for the weal or woe of its citizens. What a government of free enterprise operating under our Republican form and national Constitution does for a land and people is written in letters of gold in the history books of the whole world. We've taken a look backward, had a hasty look at America's yesterdays, so-called good old days, that our modern sowers of discord and young Turks delight in mocking and denouncing. In the words of Al Smith, let's take a look at the record of recent years. It's long past time for our modern wise men to compare what we presently have and are with what we had and were. Some of us have had our fill of the socialist theory of government foisted upon us by Franklin Roosevelt in his New Deal. Here actually was the beginning of our national confusion and defection from constitutional government. And socialism is more eminent and deadly than communism, for socialism is communism in a frock coat. Socialism is communism with a kind face and gentle smile, but full of deadly venom and slavery. Only the God in whom we trust could have brought us through the liberty-engulfing seas of the socialist New Deal, the Fair Deal, the New Frontier, and the Great Society. And while I'm on the subject, may the God who presides over the destiny of men and nations grant us a different and good deal under this forward together business. Only a nation under God could survive all this along with the social gospel invasion of our institution of religion. Many times we have referred to the prophecy made by Thomas Macaulay, the famous British historian who died on the eve of our Civil War. You've all heard it. Now more than at any other time, our history, America, should read and give heed to Thomas Macaulay's prophecy. Let me read it again. Your republic will be fearfully plundered and laid waste by barbarians in the 20th century, as the Roman Empire was in the 5th, with this difference, that the Huns and Vandals will have been engendered within your own country by your own institutions. End of quote. Once again, the basic institution of civilization are the home, the church, the school, and government. In his book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Edward Gibbon sets forth several reasons why that great civilization died. Briefly and in part, the underlying causes listed by Gibbon were, and I quote, the breakdown of the dignity and sanctity of the home, higher and higher taxes, the mad craze for pleasure becoming every year more exciting, more brutal, more immoral, the decay of individual responsibility, and finally the decay of religion, faith degenerating into mere form, losing forever the power to guide the people. That's the end of the quote. We've been brainwashed and intimidated by the modern apostles in every area of society and life where we must work, serve, and live. We must get with it. Realize that Junior must have his say and be heard in the government and decisions of the home. For we, of course, must learn that Junior is his own man, even though a child now. Have done with the puritanical, moral, and religious taboos and code of the backward, unenlightened fathers. Remember what Gibbon said contributed to the fall of ancient Rome? The breakdown of the dignity and sanctity of the home. I wonder whether in some future age, this age will be referred to as the age of permissiveness. Teach the child self-reliance. Never say don't. As parents, we must proceed with extreme caution, lest we cause the child to become inhibited. The child must never be held back, never restrained. Well, the finished product of this philosophy prowls our streets at night. I referred to it a while ago. Shouts, obscene epithets while racing along our highway. Scorns and holds all law in contempt and ushers in an age of anarchy. Can it be true that the youth of today have grievances above and beyond that was ever known by the youth of other ages? Is God, as society, as government demanding more than reason and justice has a right to demand? What has become of the freedom guaranteed to all under the provisions of our Constitution? For example, what are we doing about freedom? Freedom of speech. Freedom to choose the wars in which we will bear arms. To choose the laws that, in one's estimation, are laws that he chooses to obey or decide not to obey. Remember, I'm my own man, and will do and behave as I jolly well please. I could make that stronger. I can think of several basic courses that the rioters and protesters have overlooked and are not demanding. How about a course in good manners? This is a generation that works overtime to coin new vulgarities of speech, new crudities of manner, new ways to disgust and repel the decent, law-abiding people of culture and grace. Why not a course in personal responsibility? I tell you, I'm sick of listening to these punks, female as well as male, scream their demands. The things they demand are never gift-wrapped. They must be earned. They are the reward of toil, hard work. Charity is no substance for productive labor. Society owes me nothing but opportunity to engage in fair competition, that I may, through the industry of my mind and body, win a place where I can stand in pride among that good company who recognize that opportunity and responsibility are twins, and who join the great army of workers and build a good life and an enduring empire. Can it be possible that the ill-mannered, rioting youth of our day are the product given to the world by permissive parents? The Scriptures deny all the new psychology teaches about the way to rear children. No one ever loved his parents more than the 9 Poling kids loved their father and mother. But to our parents, sparing the rod was sin and disobedience to God. Believe me, I can testify to the fact that our mother was never disobedient to the command of her Lord. In Oregon, we had a woodshed, known to me as the Vale of Tears. One of the many things that I learned surrounded by those wooden wailing walls was that I was not my own man. I was subject to higher authority. I was a person, but a responsible person. As I learned this, I realized that I was important. And the day and days took on new meaning and dignity. I discovered that even a child of poverty could walk as a king, straight and tall. Did you ever discover, has it ever occurred to you that the Apostle Paul was really a backward soul? The poor chap was constantly speaking of Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ. Paul, a bondslave of Jesus Christ. Then, to reveal how far gone he really was, he comes forth with this classic statement, indicating that we are debtors to others, perhaps to the ages, certainly to God. For Paul says in the language of today, you're bought with a price that Jesus Christ paid. And only He, Jesus Christ, could pay. And you're an everlasting debtor to Him. The paradox of life is that we are free yet bound. We are debtors to God, country, loved ones, friends, neighbors, debtors to the past, debtors to today and tomorrow. Life's rewards are in service, unselfish and glad service, not in the riot of anarchy. Abraham Lincoln said, there is no grievance that is a fit object of redress by mob law. I frankly admit, my friends, that I'm scared. I'm weeping for my America, at the indifference of our people to the perils that haunt our days and nights. We witness the seed of our own destruction being sown by the barbarians engendered in our own institution, our homes, our schools, our institutions of religion, and even in the decisions of the highest court of the land. While we sleep and refuse to get involved, our country is slowly but certainly being taken over by the barbarians we have bred and reared, as well as the Huns and Vandals carefully trained and schooled in Moscow. This is not just the belief of a fanatic and an extremist. This truth J. Edgar Hoover has been thundering from the housetops for many years. But we shrug off the warning and avoid kooks like Poling. I've been told that I specialize in frightening simple people, old women, and little children. Of course, every sane person knows that it can't happen here, in spite of the fact Poling's trying to scare him to death by saying it can. Just can't happen here. Other people said that, and today their land is occupied, and they know what it means to be a nation of slaves. I saw men die, kids that I loved. Many times on my knees I have prayed, dear God, give me the courage to keep marching as they marched, and never, never allow me to betray the high trust they passed on to me. This is my America as she is your America. And today you and I, all sons and daughters of freedom, have a rendezvous to keep with those gallant patriots who fought, suffered, and died to keep America a strong last barricade against the slavery of tyranny, and to keep our America a mighty citadel of freedom. A condition that saddens and makes me ashamed is the ugly image so many of our churches are presenting for the whole world to view. I think that in that day when the great book is opened and the record of the church is read, in that book, this age will be designated as the age of the great apostasy. Friend has discovered, but by their own admission, the World Council and the National Council, as a member of that communist-controlled organization, have been sending aid to North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. Now, I admit I'm angry. Bluntly stated and without apology, every dollar you contribute or ever have contributed as a member of a church presently affiliated with the National Council of Churches has been a gift from you to aid the enemy to kill and seek to kill our servicemen. That gift will aid the enemy in our effort to halt and turn back the onward march of freedom. My God, may God have mercy and forgive our American churches for their acts of treason. I can't. Our socialist liberal pulpits, in many instances, have sanctioned premarital sex. From the pulpit, too. They have sought to make homosexuality respectable. Ministers and priests have encouraged draft card burners. They have led marchers in defiance of court orders. Clergymen have given aid and encouragement to city juvenile mobs, and according to police reports, these depraved juvenile punks have dealt in narcotics, violence, and related vice. Today we view the National Council and her member churches working for the admission of Red China to a seat in the United Nations. Now that's old hat to you, of course, but I want to remind you of it again. And they ignore to mention her slaughter of millions of her own people. The record shows that the National Council is so far lost in a social, moral, and theological never-never land as to be completely removed by her own choice from any apostolic Christian fellowship. I wonder how many of these pacifist socialist liberals can sing or repeat without shame the last verse of our national anthem. Just to refresh your memory, the national anthem is the Star-Spangled Banner. Wasn't it wonderful? I discovered that. I'm going to read it to you. Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved home and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just. And this be our motto: in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. How brave are we? You tell me how intelligent, well-schooled clergymen and laymen can be captured and taken in by a church agency that openly admits she is sympathetic with and aiding our country's enemies with their money. What do you think? Is it timidity or cowardice? Are these liberal socialist church leaders innocent dupes? Or have they actually been converted to communism? Now you let me explain that. Benjamin Gitlow was one of the greatest patriots I ever knew. We were together in several programs. Now, Ben Gitlow was one of the founders of the Communist Party of America. One time he was the candidate of the Communist Party for the vice presidency of this nation. He was commuting back and forth to Moscow, and old Joe was around. He was a dedicated communist. He was not a Christian, he was a Jew. And he had a fallout with Joe while they were both standing in the hall. They'd stepped out for a little intermission between meetings. And Joe was trying to control Ben Gitlow. Well, nobody could control Ben Gitlow, and he told old Joe off, probably the only living man that ever told Joe the score. And Joe said, "I'll see you after the meeting." And Joe left, went one way, and Ben was pretty smart. He went the other way and got on a plane at the airport, didn't even go back to his hotel to get his laundry. And he beat the hatchet men back to England and then on to the United States, his home. But he was an enthusiastic person. And he was advocating the overthrow of America by armed might. And Uncle Sam caught up with him, and they sent him to Sing Sing. I think it was 30 years was he sentenced. And while in Sing Sing, time weighed heavy on his hands, and he began to study American history. Studied carefully the Constitution of my America and your America. And he became a thorough convert. And after, I think it was 3 years, they pardoned him. Now, Ben Gitlow was called before congressional committees more often than any other living soul. And never once has his testimony ever been refuted and proved false. Ben died several years ago, and I wept over his death because we were friends. I loved the man. But he used strong language some preachers use in the pulpit, but not in the alley or on the street. And we had an understanding. He said, I'm not aware of my cussing, and when I'm cussing, you tell me. Maybe you can help me. I used to tell him a lot. One morning at breakfast, he worked me over. And when Ben worked you over, brethren and sisters, you were really worked over. He said, I never want to hear you say what you said last night in the closing of that address, that you had never met a minister or a priest who led you to believe by word or action and behavior that he was a communist. But then you did add that you'd met multitudes who were socialists. Now let me tell you something, Charlie. Never say that again, because I know better than that. Then he told me this story. He said, when I was with the Communist Party, Harry Ward used to bring from the seminary, Union Seminary, 10, 12, maybe 15 of his students to be indoctrinated. They came to my cell, and maybe they'd attend quite a few meetings, but we never allowed them to join the party. We indoctrinated them. We wanted that when they went out to be pastors, if they ever became suspect, they could say, and honestly, under oath, I am not now and never have been a member of the Communist Party. But, brother, they were really indoctrinated. Well, I said, Ben, how many of those characters did you indoctrinate, brainwash? Well, he said, I never kept track. Maybe 150. Maybe more. Because we continued this course through several years. Now he said, Charlie, here are these indoctrinated students. They're spread out all over America. What do you think they're preaching? Do you think they're playing patsy with freedom? Many of them are dedicated communists. Well, I quit saying what I'd been saying. If we love the church and sincerely wish to turn her again to her pilgrim character, the business of being the church, we must never accuse her clergy in the aggregate, wholesale, of betraying God and holy vows they have taken. And the truth is, there are still great numbers who have not betrayed God and His truth. I believe the rank and file, probably a majority of our ministerial fraternity, are loyal to the Word and are patriotic Americans. But don't you for 1 minute allow clerical garb and eloquent and churchly tongue to take you in. The evil cult of religious charlatans is large and growing daily. These are the loud clamor boys who desecrate and prostitute their high and holy calling, and who work overtime to shame and discredit the church of the living God. We have with us a ministerial cult who think it smart to downgrade and discredit the Scriptures, a textbook of the true Christian church. They anxiously announce that the Bible is full of myths and fables. The 10 Commandments are passé and were authored by superstitious, primitive people. These are the out-front religious pitchmen that make headlines and leave the impression that they speak for the whole Christian family. They issue Protestant papal bulls and call press conferences to announce that premarital sex is proper and right if no one is hurt. You know, I get all choked up when I read these statements from these characters. To continue, there is nothing wrong nor unnatural in homosexuality, vulgarity, blasphemy, obscenity, and nudity. These have their place in our culture. Dear God, how long will your patience endure? Through the failure of the church to obey God's voice and proclaim the everlasting truths of His book, an apostate church has produced a generation of spiritual and moral illiterates and ignoramuses. The barbarians Thomas Macaulay prophesied would be engendered in our own institutions for our destruction are upon us. The immorality and degeneracy of this age, to a greater degree than we care to admit, is a result of a church and clergy that turned to strange God. As in the days of Daniel, the conditions that wrought the destruction of proud Babylon under King Belshazzar are at work today. Modern defectors from God's laws and divine truth have turned from the worship of the Creator and now worship the creation. As a people, as a church, they have praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, iron, and wood, and stone, and the God in whose hand their breath is, and whose are all their ways, they have not glorified. Never forget that God is not mocked. He will not play second fiddle. He will be first and supreme. He has demonstrated this truth through the ages. And the rule applies whether it be an individual, an institution, a nation, a people. When we forsake God, we're doomed. We're through. We're finished. William said it in a different way, but it comes out the same. Those people who will not be governed by God will be governed by tyrants. The tyranny of Moscow or the tyranny of sin either spells slavery. You know, I wish I had the genius and the power and the youth to make the whole world realize that back of all our misery is sin. I know the answer to the problems of the world, and you know the answer. The nation that forgets God shall perish. But it is also true that back of every personal heartache, our anguish, our tears, is sin. The road to peace and security, the road to the good life, is a road that leads to God. The politicians do not have the answer. The answer is between the covers of His book. It's as simple as that. But how to make a bludgeoned, tortured world discover the truth? I suspect our land is full of people like me who are weary of listening to the same warnings, the same panaceas, thundered from pulpits and lecture platforms, for the most part a rehash of what we've heard before. Often I get a strong feeling that the people I'm addressing know as much as I do, maybe more, about the subject being presented. Then again, I wonder whether, in a sense, we're not just talking to ourselves. And I wonder, where are the uninformed, the unschooled, those who have lost their way, and how do we get to them? I've been wondering this for 55 years. Oh, I'm not in a mood to quit and turn back, not so long as God gives me a voice and two legs to hold me up. I'm grateful that He doesn't grade me on the converts I win to the cause either. I often remind myself that the book tells us Noah was a preacher of righteousness for 120 years, and he didn't have one convert. But God accepted him and walked with him and loved him. And I think when Noah stood before God, He said, Noah, you were faithful. Come on in. You'll not go through a book, say, what kind of a report did you make to your Baptist convention, to your Presbyterian presbytery, to your Episcopal overlords? What kind of a report? How many converts? How many churches did you organize? Just one thing He'll ask me. Were you in there pitching all the time? Were you standing up to be counted? Were you playing on the team and giving your best? You know, I'm fed up with the doves who keep preaching that we must manage to coexist with godless, communist Russia. The only The only language these savages understand is the strength of the strong. We heard this last night, didn't we? I don't like to be pushed around, neither do you. I'm angered when we allow the communists to capture our ship, torture our men of the Navy, and hold them captive until their very sanity is threatened. I'm fed up with the sending of notes of protest to a fourth-rate power after they shoot from the sky one of our planes and in that open act of war kill every member of that plane's crew. What kind of people have we become? Sure, I know the alternative to the course our leaders have taken, but believe me, there come times when the price for peace is just too high, much too high. In our present course, we're only delaying the day of reckoning. It is inevitable, and I'm sure of this. Eventually, we're going to have to fight. And when that day comes, may it not be another Pearl Harbor. May it be a day of our own choosing. In that day, may we not play at war and let them slaughter our finest youth, but may we make war to win, employing all of our vast power and every required weapon in our arsenal. I'm fed up with being coerced and pushed around by black, white, red, yellow, or pink rioting anarchists and other subversives. I'm fed up with lawless rioters who bait and curse our police, with school officials who stoop to negotiate with punks who have destroyed school records, vandalized and set school property on fire, kidnapped the dean or some other faculty member, and when finally emerging from the property, they by force have taken over and occupied, arrogantly saunter out, unlawfully armed to the teeth. I'm fed up with black students at a state university in New York who dictate 11 demands, including one for a 35 weekly stipend for Negroes. Not long ago, the demand of the Negro was for equality. Now it is preferential treatment. I'm fed up with foul-mouthed punks, black and white, who profane our flag and subject this symbol of our honor, freedom, and brave history to their dirty obscenities. If I had my way, they'd be put in stockades, isolated and kept separated from free, decent people who love liberty. But you know something? I'd give them a choice. Either the stockade and their days on a rock pile or a free one-way trip to Russia, the workers' paradise. We used to have flag wavers. Now we have a cowardly breed of flag burners. I'm fed up with the black activist James Foreman and his followers of the National Economic Development Council and their asinine demand for $500 million in reparations from white churches and synagogues. It'll be interesting to see whether the white churches have been so thoroughly intimidated by these militant blacks as to shell out with this $500 million blackmail. I know one church that won't contribute not one beat-up tin dime. You know something? I've been thinking that in the interest of survival and self-defense, the white churches should bring a countersuit and demand I'd say $600 million in reparations from these black militants for the rape, murder, pillage, and anarchy history records they engaged in after the Civil War and that ugly era of the carpetbaggers. I think the reparations justly due from that period, added to the loss suffered in arson, looting, and bloody riots these black anarchists have organized and led in modern days, would be pretty well balanced. It would balance the amount they demand for extreme suffering their people have experienced since white slave traders bought their ancestors from black savage chiefs. Their own ancestors sold them and separated them from their cool mud huts, naked and happy existence and the merciful care of their black witch doctors. I'm not minimizing or making light of the horror of the heathen, dirty, inhuman traffic in human souls. I sometimes wonder how God can ever forgive man for engaging in the slave trade. But these protesters have no more valid right to claim reparations for the shame and suffering experienced by their slave ancestors than whites have to demand indemnity for the crimes they, the rioting militant blacks, have perpetrated upon our people and institutions in these modern times. The tolerance of long-suffering, decent, law-abiding people has been overtaxed. I'm going to play the part of a prophet. I prophesy that unless legally constituted authority is permitted to put an end to this mad reign of anarchy, the backlash of angry citizens of the Republic will explode and manifest itself in a vigilance force akin to the original Ku Klux Klan, Night Riders, post-Civil War days. God grant a return to sanity by these irrational militants before a counter-uprising sweeps over our land and engulfs us in a revolution that will destroy them and much of our freedom. I'm fed up with self-ordained black messiahs who are an unholy odor and embarrassment to the good and decent Americans of their own race, and there are multitudes of them. These unbathed, irreverent parasites. You know, some of the finest people I know and some of my closest friends are a little bit more sunburned than I am. And I love them. And I'd just as soon have them as neighbors. I'm fed up with the self-ordained black messiahs who are unholy odor and embarrassment to the good and decent Americans of their own race. These unbathed, irreverent, parasitic characters hold in derision and flout the sacred customs and high ideals of our society and religion. I'm thinking of these precious principles that have made us a people with malice toward none and charity toward all men. But their personal behavior, secret and public, and by the anarchistic dogmas and angry demands they arrogantly thunder from invaded campuses and pulpits that have been surrendered by frightened pacifistic clergymen. They would capture and take us back to their jungle of violence and social corruption and dishonor, where so many of them presently have taken up their abode, seem to enjoy. I'm angered and sickened when churches will open their pulpits to Reverend Ralph Abernathy. According to published reports, Abernathy was chased down Dexter Street in Montgomery, Alabama, by an angered husband had an axe in his hand. Beautiful drama. According to sworn testimony in the transcript for the trial of one Edward Davis, he's the fellow with the axe. Davis was after Abernathy because he had seduced his wife when she was a 15-year-old girl and a member of Abernathy's church. Now, I didn't dream this up. Write this down for your investigation. This is case number 8741, State v.S. Davis, Circuit Court of Montgomery County, Alabama. November term, 1958, before Judge Eugene W. Carter. There you have it. And I tell you, the ugly story told by the girl, Vivian McCoy Davis, is in the record and reeks with rotten sex deviation. Is a church so far gone, so far lost, that you'll tolerate this ugly, evil character in her pulpit and admit this character sometimes for a visit in our White House? Baird Rustin, another of the late Martin Luther King's lieutenants, always a leader for the black revolutionaries, was an organizer for the Communist Party for 12 years. How much of this you know, but keep it alive in your mind. Later he became head of the War Resisters League. This character is a homosexual with a long police record. And you've read the Pasadena, California police report, the arrest of Baird Rustin and two men at 2:30 a.m., January 21st, 1953. I'm getting sick of my stomach. Is it unreasonable to assume that Brother King, while in the flesh, was fully aware of the character of the assistants he called to his staff? Do you think he didn't know? I'm fed up with these pseudo-religious leaders who organize and lead marches designed to end in violence. I'm fed up with narcotic crazy hippies, whatever their color. The subversive Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichaels. It's long past time for America to quit playing games with these agents of destruction. Long past time when they should have been put out of circulation. But never forget that always America has been rich and strong in a youth unmatched by any nation in this crazy old globe. I have thrilled as I have seen the youth of America marching tall, clean, brave, and strong for God and country. And I've seen them march knowing they were marching out to die, and they kept on marching. Today's great tragedy and shame is that the ugly, unholy few constitute the image the world views and remembers. But America stands proud and strong today because of the devotion, because of the dedication of gallant kids who love country more than they love life and died that we might remain a free people. I want to close with this. A letter was sent to the Phoenix, Arizona Republic by Gail Jenks of Tempe, Arizona. This letter was written by Sergeant James R. Smith of the 3rd Marine Division in Vietnam. It's a moving letter and a writing that should forever shame the so-called conscientious objector, the draft card burner, and the regular common garden variety cowardly bum. This writing has been titled Bravery in Vietnam, Cowardice at Home. And in the language of the Navy and of the Army, now hear this. I quote, "My God, how can it be that one boy lies rotting from malnutrition and torture in a jungle prison camp in North Vietnam, and another boy spits and tramples on the flag of this country on the steps of a university of learning, that one boy lies sightless in a United States Naval Hospital from communist-inflicted face wounds, and another boy uses a communist flag to drape himself in defiance of the laws of his country, that one man of medicine begins his 13th straight hour standing over an operating table in the pursuit of life for men serving this country, and another man of medicine employs crowds of young men to refuse to serve their country, that one Negro holds the face of his dead white comrade in his arms and cries pitifully in a dirty mud hole in Vietnam, and another Negro screams with hate against his white brother in the streets of countless American cities, that one boy lies in a coffin beneath the ground because he believed in duty to country, and another boy lies on a dingy cot giving blood to the enemies of his country, that one man of God shields a wounded boy from an enemy bayonet with his body and dies. Another man of God uses his cloth as a shield to teach hate, dissension, and lawlessness. My God, how can it be? May God forgive us for our indifference and for our failure to just half crusade against the things that are destroying our beloved America today. God bless you all.
Thank you, Ray Wilson, and thank you, Dr. Poling, for a magnificent address.